Now, of course, the big question is, we heard it earlier also of Kö, things are changing fast. Also policy here in the EU is being iterated very quickly as we speak. Now the question is, of course, what does that mean for digital product passports and what's next? So this is what our next panel will dive into. It's my pleasure that I can hand over the moderation to somebody who's much more well-versed in the topic. It's Julia Poliskanova. She joined TNE already, I think, almost 10 years ago. I think it's almost a jubilee soon for you. And she is the Senior Director at Transport and Environment, so the leading NGO for mobility and energy transformation in the EU. And I know she promised me this panel will really dive into the nitty-gritty details and the details of policy in action. And she said we're not going to shy away from the difficult question, because this is really the thing when talking about policy, giving it some edge and not just having it as a fluffy cloud there in the air. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I'll leave it up to you to introduce our speakers. Welcome, Julia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
One last thing, Julia. I was asked that we just line up as we are on the picture, because then it's the easiest for everybody to know who's here. If I can ask you as the moderator to sit on the outside, it'll make it also easier for you to see all of your panelists. And then everybody else, in a minute, just match your picture.
Absolutely. So no pressure there. A panel to delve into policies. Big topic. We're here in Brussels. You're all here, of course, already interested in working on batteries. We as TNE often say that batteries are the 80% climate solution. It's about pretty much most of transport. It's also about energy decarbonization. So it's one of the biggest challenges we have to do. Here in Europe and globally, we have at least two major challenges. So we in Europe want to onshore and have local supply chain, which is proving very difficult. And more broadly and more globally, we also all want to see a more sustainable, clean and ethical supply chain. And that's where policy comes in, setting sustainability requirements, transparency rules, due diligence mandates, for example. And that's also the place where the digital product passport, or DPP, or in particular the battery passport, really shines and can really provide the solutions by providing information, by benchmarking companies, and by simply creating credibility, whether it's on the sourcing, where it's sourced from, or whether it's on sustainability. It creates that credibility in that product and allows everyone in the society, civil society I represent, governments, etc., to really trust what is happening in the value chain. However, we all know, I think here in the room, the benefits of DPPs, but how can we really scale and make them work? And I think this is where policy plays a large role to really accelerate that forward and create the right framework to facilitate this. And this is what we'd like to do on this panel by hearing from different actors through the supply chain on what do they see as good in policy, bad in policy, missing, and what needs to be done. So without further ado, I would like to invite all the speakers to join me. So we're joined by Silke Obst, who is Deputy Head of Unit in DG GROW for Data and Knowledge for Policy, Business and People. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Holger Berg, who is Vice Director, Circular Economy at the Wuppertal Institute in Germany. Then we have Ilga von Dalvik, who is General Director at Recharge, Europe's battery association, representing many of those companies that we are trying to build in Europe. And last but absolutely not least, Alan Carey, who is Chief External Affairs Officer at Circulor, one of the leading companies in the space of providing the data and services. Yes, it's a bit tricky with the things, so I hope we can all...
checking where we are.
I'm checking where we are.
All seated correctly.
Yes. And I need to make sure that I see all of you as well here on the corner.
And Julia, while you're getting settled, just once more, use Slido to ask a question while the discussion is already going on, because maybe Julia can refer it to directly, and an explicit invitation to everybody taking part online as well. Don't be shy, ask your questions, also the very difficult ones.
Yes, thank you so much. It's so great to have, it's so Oh, so great we have Master of Ceremony to remind us and take us through all of this. So I'd like to start first turning to you, Silke. So you're coming from the Commission. The Commission is a key policy body here in Brussels, at least for 12 years of my life here working on policies, and of course from a very key unit at the heart of some of the DPP policy. So maybe you can just take us through some of the policy developments in terms of DPPs, you know, what is really happening in the Commission, what do you see as key insights here?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia, and thanks for the invitation. It feels a bit strange to leave this enthusiasm that I feel in the room for batteries and really dive into the details, but I will do just that. What are we actually doing in the Commission? We are implementing a regulation that you all know very well, the Sustainable Product Regulation, ESPR in our jargon. And this regulation luckily tells us very much what we have to do at a systems level. So I'm not speaking only about batteries here. I know you're the battery people. I don't know very much about batteries, but I know a thing or two about the system as such. And so we find quite some guidance about what we have to do. We have to build a central registry. It's not only built, it will also be operated by the Commission, where the DPP will be registered. But it will only contain the metadata, as you know, and the data as such will be stored decentrally. That's also anchored in the regulation as such. And then a bit later on, because there we don't have a legal deadline, we will also build a web portal. Again, this is for the Commission to do, and this is also for the Commission to operate. Now, we've already seen some deadlines, and we know that timing is very challenging. Batteries, you are our first baby, so we're really attached to you. We really want it to be a roaring success, and you will come on board in February 2027. And the regulation and we as a team have done some retro planning, counting back from that. So by mid-2026, we will have the registry up and running. It needs to be functional, and we need to do some testing and onboarding, of course, together with some of you, I hope, because we need real use cases then. What we're doing as well is we're having very close cooperation with our colleagues in Senelec. That's the standardization part, also foreseen by the regulation, but I think we're implementing it in an innovative way because of the very high time pressure. So we're expecting results from Senelec on 8 standardization areas at the end of 2025, which is already this year. Oh my God. Not the adoption, last year I was speaking, I said 2025, okay, that's next year. No, it's this year. And this is why we are actually working in a very agile way, meeting all the time, physically and virtually, and always sending results and drafts back and forth so that we can give guidance and the colleagues can work, the experts can work, and we actually co-shape what we want. And at the same time, we in the team, we are not proposing yet, but we are preparing the secondary legislation that we also need to adopt. There are several. We see how many exactly we need and what we can simply leave to the harmonized standards that come out of Senelec, hopefully. But one act we have already launched, and you will soon see the invitation to a public consultation. Some of you have maybe participated in the call for evidence, and that's the delegated act to lay down the requirements for DPP service providers. Now, I don't know how interesting or important that is for you in the battery industry, but that is a bit the canvas by which we're working. But you can see it's different work strands, and we're really working full speed while really trying to involve the industry as much as possible, because we believe very much that this is a common project, and the idea of business value really resonates with me and with the team.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks very much for outlining some of the steps. I think it was helpful to have that overview. So now that we've heard from a policymaker, I would like to turn to my other panelists, maybe just in the order with which we are at the moment, and ask you that question. So you're following this topic from different perspectives. Do you believe today in Europe the policy is there? Is it sufficient to really scale this or not? So Holger, maybe starting with you, and then Ilke, and then Ellen.
Well, I think in many ways the policy is there. I mean, this is kind of why we're all sitting here, and which at least in the beginning brought us together. I think some parts where there is still work to do, and where I think more, let's say, transparency or more clarity could help is on the part of content. So I guess everyone's kind of very much expecting the delegated acts to see what has to be within the passports at the end of the day, which is currently for the projects I'm in, it seems a lot like the missing puzzle piece. And another thing we'll be coming to later, which I think will be very, very important, is to make sure that outreach beyond the European Union is something that is really enforced very soon, because we can see with the work I'm doing, for example, with the United Nations, how this policy has already gained interest, but also created sorrow among other countries, among other regions.
Absolutely. Sorry, I think, Silke, you wanted to just add a sentence here to what Holger just said.
Yeah, thank you very much, because the 2 points are very important in our view as well. Of course, the content will come with the delegated acts, product-specific delegated acts. It will take a bit of time, because there again, the regulation foresees this, but I personally think we couldn't do it any other way, that for each of these product-specific acts, we do an impact assessment with stakeholder consultation. So, I mean, the batteries are a bit of the old one out, because you already have your batteries regulation, right? But for the other sectors, I mean, I cannot invite you, if you're also concerned by other sectors, can't invite you enough to be part of this, because the content needs to fit. It needs to fit for the industry, it needs to fit for supply chain, it needs to make sense for consumers, for recyclers, and you're the ones who know this best. But on your point on the international, I'm also very glad that you bring this up. Because, of course, supply chains do not stop at the border of the EU, and we see this for critical raw materials and batteries. I mean, that's a case in point. So we have started being very active at international level as well. The EU, UN, IEEE is not a standard-setting organization, really. And so we have mapped the different initiatives, and it's actually mind-boggling. Yeah. What we would like to see is that the national standard-setting organizations be a bit more proactive. So we are actually in the process of reaching out to them as I speak, concerning, for instance, the draft recommendation 49 of UNICE SafeAct, telling them, like, look, there is a consultation, this is a deadline, please submit your comments by that deadline. Don't leave us alone, because we have been commenting as Commission, but very few other member states have been speaking up, and it cannot only be always the Commission and Germany speaking. That will not do the trick. And then I was discussing with Thomas Knut and telling him, I didn't have time to tell him, actually UNICE are other organizations as well have sometimes strange feedback forms. So unfortunately, you have to use these feedback forms, and then they will take into account. So please tell your standard setting organizations to get involved. They get an email. We will reach out to them. We can explain, but we're really, really trying to activate the network. And please help us do that.
Thank you. Thanks for this nice call to action to everyone as well. So I'd like to continue and listen. So we will come back to the detail of implementing regulations because it's very important. But broadly, Ilka, on policies today from the batteries industry's perspective, are they enough to really scale DPPs?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me and working with previously with the European Battery Alliance since its inception in 2017, now for Recharge. We have been following really the development of the battery regulation, which is a very novel concept, centering around one product, essentially the batteries, through its entire life cycle and also along its entire supply chain. And I think with this concept of the battery passport, we are on a very good way. There is a lot already that has been developed ahead of its implementation, which I find really mind-boggling as well, that the global industry really is starting to gearing up in anticipation of it. But now it's a lot about its implementation, and we heard a lot about it already. I think that is really the time is of the essence right now. 2027 is approaching very fast, and in industry perspectives, this is actually tomorrow. And we still have so many open questions when it comes to how to implement, what to implement. Now, I think we're touching upon this omnibus package later on as well. So I think the framework is there. Like the large picture is there, but the devil will be in the detail of the implementation.
Absolutely, and we'll get there next as we finish this round. Ellen.
I couldn't agree more with some of Ilka's points. I think the patchwork is morphing into a framework, and that framework is globally. I think business DPPs are taking hold globally, not only through policy, but also increased harmonization across standard setters, and we see that active work. I think in essence, the EUBR is a global precedent that is very important and also very revered. I hear people around the world being like, we're behind on DPPs, we're behind on knowing our supply chains. And also they're evolving from this is compliance and this is onerous to, wait, this is transparency, which brings resilience, which brings competitiveness, which brings efficiency and greater accuracy in my reporting. And so we certainly see a global sentiment around that. I think there are complementary policies in, say, the US market, and I think there is leadership emerging in the US market that says very bluntly, we're behind Europe on the EUBR. We want to catch up, and we want to work with industry on creating more resilience through transparency and through digital product passports.
Yes. Absolutely. So many of you mentioned the importance, saying that the framework is there, but now it's really about doing. We're also sitting here just a day before the Commission will unveil its famous omnibus package, and it's likely that some of the aspects, for example, around due diligence, will be simplified one way or another. We've also heard how important it is to actually implement the delegated and implement acts in the battery regulation, but some are delayed. So I do want to give an opportunity now to starting on the other side, and then Silke, I'll let you comment where you can, really delving into this topic of implementation. So on the one hand, the omnibus push, what are the risks, is it actually delaying what we're trying to do around DPPs? And around implementation of some of the laws that are also affected by omnibus, where do you see the main pinch points? Which ones are the priority to go ahead in terms of delegated acts? And what are the main concerns, what we're delaying? So Ellen, maybe I start with you and I go the other way around.
Okay, we work this way. I think responsible business is responsible business. And I think that it's very widely known in terms of what it takes to have responsible business, and also to exercise effective due diligence of supply chains, et cetera. So that is increasingly globally knowing the provenance and material flow of critical minerals and the inherited activities that companies have. I think that, again, that's an area that the EU has led and others are quickly adopting. And it's not the time to step back at all, but to remain steady and steer the course. And as businesses, to continue steady towards effective due diligence and full responsibility of those upstream risks that can cause not just a lack of compliance, but business risk with customers, et cetera.
Ilka, maybe tell us more in terms of the depth from the battery industry.
Okay, I think this omnibus package that we're all expecting, it really aims at streamlining sustainability reporting and by doing this, reducing administrative burdens for industry. I think this is something that we also have pushed for, but what at least we're seeing now is also a risk that we're actually stepping back a little bit from our sustainability ambitions. And this is nothing we have really asked for. It's mainly about harmonization when it comes to reporting. So we do the work once and then we can actually fulfill different requirements. But I see a risk if you're now, as you say, stepping back from a lot of those sustainability and ambitions, and when it comes also to having more control over our supply chain. I think there is a risk really that we're losing a little bit of the upside of the sustainability reporting and making our supply chains more transparent and more responsible, and taking a step back on why did we even ask for it in the first place. I think it came a lot about this discussions on batteries. By that time when we started, that used a lot of cobalt, and it was a lot in the press about this blood minerals and child labor and so on. And are we all now taking a step back from it just to make our life easier on the reporting front?
And what about, so maybe to come back to the topic of implementation of some of these laws. So what do you see from the perspective of the battery industry, for example, here, some of the biggest concerns around delays, around which acts, and what would you encourage the Commission to prioritize, as of course capacity is limited?
Well, I think don't want to paint the devil on the wall, but this omnibus package might also need to a re-evaluation of the battery regulation scope as such, which probably would entail even further delays in the implementation. And I think one of it that we're all waiting for eagerly, regardless of what position we're taking, is the carbon footprint methodology. And I mean, this delays is always creating uncertainties. It holds back investment decisions and so on. So I think this is something we urgently need really to step forward. And then we may like it, we may not like it, we may like it more or less, regardless. But at least it will give some certainty what to expect.
No, absolutely. I agreed from TNE side. So I'll come to this side. But maybe, Ellen, I want to come back to you, Elsie. Maybe you wanted to add also a little bit more of detail around how some of the delays maybe on some implementing laws impact what you're trying to do, circular, and where do you see major risks, and what would be one or two of those implemented or delegated acts that you really need to see this year?
Yeah, I think implementing battery passports and digital product passports is not snapping your fingers. It's not switching on a light switch. It takes work, it takes teams, it takes cross-departmental teams within a, say, OEM customer or a tier 1 supplier to onboard different departments. So as Circular, as a leading technology supply chain transparency company, the time is now to get started. So if we're talking about battery passports by February of 2027, it's really critical to get started today and to also onboard those supply chain participants, start getting data, and start gaining the visibility of the upstream. I think key for us is the due diligence requirements, Articles 49 plus. I think increasingly those articles and proof of provenance plus material flow of critical minerals. First of all, it's an advancement from the OECD due diligence guidance, so that should not be anything new, right? That's a continuation of what companies and businesses in this community have already known. And then increasingly, those OECD due diligence guidelines plus the EUBR, its past legislation, are being adopted globally. So to wait just on the secondary legislation or what happens here is not putting our heads up, looking around, and understanding that this is the standard that is increasingly required.
Yes, thank you. So, Holger, I'll turn to you now. So, we heard a lot about the due diligence aspects of it, the carbon footprint, generally the risks around omnibus. How do you see this from the bigger perspective? What risks does it pose to either simplify, you can also call it deregulate, or delay some of the implementation?
Well, in terms of simplification, I'm not very much concerned if things stay in the direction of keeping the goals of sustainability as they were before, as I think Ilka has already mentioned. I think what we should not have is throwing things overboard that are here to make a difference in Europe, but also to make a difference for Europe's competitiveness, because we are very good in the clean tech part, and we should make sure that that is being maintained as a strength. Second, so Tilman said we'll have 90 points in the battery pass, 90 data points, not 2,000. If the passport is meant to be an instrument for a whole range of different purposes, well, then obviously we'll have to cut it down a bit. But that brings me to a second point. First of all, we're not going to have the product passport. I mean, there's 3 target groups already: authorities, businesses, or consumers, and private end customers. So we'll have 3 passports. So it's not the passport that is the important stuff. And I think Alan already hinted at that. It's the data behind. We need to have the right database. If that is there, then we can start to think about creating the information for certain queries, be it reporting, be it passes, that we need. And for that matter, we will have to see the battery passport and every passport as a push towards more transparency, towards more sustainability, but also towards more digitization or digitalization. And this has to go hand in hand. I think it's very well impressed, for example, in the Draghi report, but we have to see that both ends are being observed, are being part of the objectives in the same manner and with the same depth.
Right. Thank you. Very, very clear. So, Silke, a lot has been said. Quite a few people commented on the aspects they see. So maybe I give you the last word to react to what you've heard.
Thank you, Julia. Indeed, a lot of points. So to the omnibus, I am not in Ursula von der Leyen's head. But I believe that the intention is to simplify and not to scale back. I don't know how much this is wishful thinking on my part, but I truly believe this is the intention. That there were some overlaps and some inconsistencies between the CSR and CSDD and all those acts, and so it was a cleaning up exercise rather than a scaling back exercise. Now, if what we see tomorrow is anything else than that and entails scaling back, then don't forget that it is only a Commission proposal. The Commission does not set the law, the Commission proposes the law, and then it needs to be adopted by the co-legislators, and this is where you come in. Because you have understood that this new Commission is all about competitiveness, and you as industry can explain to the Commission and to your member state representatives and to the MEPs that sustainability also means competitiveness. I would say for the majority of the European industry, especially if we reason in a global world, it is our competitive advantage that we are usually more sustainable and that we're good with data, even if we need to digitalize a bit more. But you said it in the beginning, we have we are in advance compared to the rest of the world. So let's take this as a competitive advantage, as not a disadvantage. And I think then we can work it out. Now, to make the omnibus a bit more complex, just to tell you that there will be several omnibuses coming, and the DPP will, if everything goes well, feature in the third one that is also coming very, very quickly after this first one. And I hope that we will manage to position the DPP as a system more even like a container for all product-related information. I mean, we talked about market surveillance. The market surveillance angle is covered at the edge of the ESPR as well, but I hope that we can use this opportunity of the omnibus, third omnibus, to spell this out more and make a legislative proposal on this. But we still have to work on this internally. On your concerns about the delays, the carbon footprint, the due diligence requirements, I really wish that I had my battery colleagues in the pockets, because then I said, could you please answer this question? I know this is a typical European Commission answer, like, hey, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this, but we are speaking a lot with our battery colleagues, because we hear concerns and complaints when the community say, like, okay, this should be standardized, this is missing, here is the gap, and why isn't that coming? So since the batteries are our first baby, we are conveying these concerns very, very, very forcefully, and you can count on me to convey these concerns as well.
Yes, thanks a lot. So I think we've all, yes, great. I think we all know that DPPs will be in the third omnibus, so let's all see what it is. I know the Master of Ceremony is here. I believe it's because there are a lot of questions on Slido.
Actually, there are a lot of questions.
Great.
17 already, and maybe even some questions here in the room, so we'll really have to hurry through, because
Let's
I
go to
promised
questions.
Julia that we're done by 20 past for a follow-up appointment. I'll just try to hurry through. If you feel like you have an adequate answer, just give it very quickly, and the quicker we work, the more questions we can handle. What is the time frame for CO2 footprint delegated, for the CO2 footprint delegated act already promised a year ago?
I don't think anyone here can answer this question. I think we're all waiting. I think the honest answer today, sorry if I can take
What's
the role of a moderator.
the most favorite
there is no
question,
date.
the most popular question, yeah.
There is no date, but I think, Silke, you hear from everyone here how important that is, and hopefully it's something you can also pass on to your colleagues in a fellow unit in DG Grow.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry, and this is something that I could have checked before had I known the question, and I could have put my colleagues under pressure, but what I would say is that this is important for you, and I understand why.
Next question, if you have an answer, somebody. How often is the data in the battery passport updated? Who updates the data in the battery passport? That rather technical question.
Ellen, maybe you want to come in?
So, as I mentioned, Circular is a battery passport provider and a upstream material traceability service provider as well. So the idea here is that we really achieve that greater accuracy and greater efficiency by connecting all of the supply chain participants in a way that preserves everyone's data, but informs that battery passport, and then uses permission-based rules to share different information with various stakeholders along that supply chain. So there's initial work in connecting supply chain participants with the economic operator and a service provider like Circular, and then but there's the greater efficiency, greater accuracy in that we're gathering the data in real time and continuously updating those passports. Also, these passports need to be kept up to date for the next 10, 15 years, and so that's something that a company like Circular takes care of for the economic operator who is responsible for that battery passport on the market.
Now, the next question, I'm not sure if anybody here on the panel can answer it, but maybe somebody in the room. Yes? Oh, there is a comment from the audience. Yes, please.
Yes, this is from my side because
Just
from
go closer to the
standardization, it's
microphone.
quite clear.
Sorry, just closer to the microphone. When you're sitting, that's perfect, yeah.
From standardization and from the regulation is quite clear. Yeah, regarding the update for the batteries, there is mentioned at least every day, but there are other regulations like RED 3 saying something else, and this is currently under consideration how to deal with that. Because here is something to be done in order to clarify this, because there are some thoughts, even from the European Commission, to have at least real-time data. You can imagine what does it mean yeah, for everything. So this means, from that perspective, the regulation is quite clear, but the applicability of that has to be at least improved from our perspective in order to keep, as Ms. Obst had already explained, simplicity as much as possible, and of course to have it in a way that it is useful for everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thomas Knote was here answering this question. Did I see a hand raise in the row back there? Yeah, please. What's your name and...
Gordana Girans, representing MGT Open from Croatia. I thought a follow-up question, since we are talking about data here. Data and energy consumption go also hand in hand. So I wanted to hear from you, from the experts, how is that considered? We have decarbonization efforts, but are we slowing down our decarbonization efforts because we will produce a lot of data and have to store the data and have to manage, and we said just a moment ago, update that data. So are we keeping data on also our energy consumption because of data?
Quick answer.
No, I think that's the beauty of a decentralized approach, right? And this is not large amounts of data. There's differences in terms of big AI compute models and then just simple data gathering and upkeep. So the information use will not cause any spike or any even nominal increase in energy use.
Thanks a lot. There's a question, I don't know, maybe somebody in the audience know, if you do as well. When will Germany, the so the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, nominate the notifying authority for conformity assessment bodies to apply for notification as a notified body? Whoever can make sense of that question, who has an answer?
It's a very important question, but I'm not sure people on the panel, the right people to answer. If someone wants to volunteer from the audience.
Anybody in the
But
room?
we won't force anyone.
Okay, no. I'll come back to how we get answers for that in a minute. But let's first approach the other questions. How shall interested persons gain additional access to the required information? How will they authenticate themselves? Ms. Obst. Or also, Holger, if you have an answer?
Mine is a bit, I would be interested in your views, because we are working, of course, on an authentication system. I mean, we built an access management system for the whole system, not only for batteries, and that requires authentication of the different actors. Now, this is still under discussion, also with Sensenelec and in the Commission. We haven't come to terms with that yet, but we will have at the end of this year. This is our timeline, but that's obviously very, very important. There are several possibilities. It would really go very much into technical details, but that's very much under consideration and in our work stream.
No, I'm not an expert on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that conversation is also growing globally. To Julia's opening point about trusting this data, so data redundancy and authentication, either through a third party uploading their document at the very simplest terms, or geolocation integration, or authenticated document services, things like that. That's certainly a growing concern that's taking focus.
Next question. For BAT regulation, there was an implementing act promised in February 25, containing guidance for due diligence reports required in August 25. When will it be available?
So maybe I can. So I think Alan stressed how important that is. So it's something we've been trying to engage also with Commission, with your other colleagues on this. The work is ongoing. The work is ongoing, and at the point of content, I think the work is pretty much done. But what I understand is that the current omnibus discussion is delaying the release of a lot of those documents because we first need to see what the overall omnibus will do on due diligence before we actually get to implementing those things. So let's see what tomorrow's documents say, and following that, if battery due diligence is still kept in, we will start seeing progress on the due diligence implemented measures.
Quick answer.
I think it's important to take a global perspective when looking at due diligence. First and foremost, the EUBR builds off of the OECD guidance. That's also being incorporated into a number of global international standards. I think also something that has been defined in the last year from the US market is that due diligence is knowing proof of provenance and material flow of critical minerals. Who touched what, when, and where? And just putting on my US hat, that due diligence is very simple, and it's probably not very thorough, but it is visibility of certain minerals, materials, all the way to tier N, and then that inherited activity by the importer or that end manufacturer. And so I think that global approach is certainly spreading and harmonizing.
Now, there's so many more questions, and I'm sure a lot of these questions actually are from our online audience who unfortunately can't join us in the coffee break. But we do have a fix for that. If you do look at the slide in the online screen, all the way on the bottom right, you see the domain of the Battery Pass project, thebatterypass.eu. If you add a info at before that, you have the official email address, so info@thebatterypass.eu, and the team of the Battery Pass project will try to scramble and answer all your questions. So just send an email. All these wonderful questions we have there, some of them are very specific. Just send an email and the team will try to answer these questions. Everybody else is more than welcome to join us now in the coffee break to really dive down into all the nitty-gritty details. Before you get up, of course, thanks a lot to all of our wonderful panelists joining us today. Thanks a lot, Silke Obst, for coming by today.